Hello, my name is Will Villano. Today I will be affirming the resolution at hand. Namely, I believe we have an outstanding ethical obligation to protect and preserve extraterrestrial and microbial life. In my analysis, I employ the use of several sources, but lack the time to cite every author. The links to these texts can be found in the description section of this video. Under the current status quo, there are no international laws that guarantee this protection, which enables a plethora of harms to exist. Limiting intergalactic travel and deciding how to best go about space travel without harming space life in a way that democratically involves all nations is ultimately the best solution for our planet. The justification for this is as follows. Number 1. No international laws can enable the possibility of intergalactic war with aliens. Kevin Hand, Deputy Chief Scientist at NASA, believes that we will discover alien life within 20 years. Furthermore, an increasing number of scientists believe that by meddling in the affairs of space, we increase the risk of alien contact. Renowned physicist Stephen Hawking warned humanity in 2010 that by attempting to contact aliens, the likely outcome would be comparable to Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas. Affirming the resolution will reduce likelihood of coming across foreign invaders. Number 2. By negating the resolution and not limiting space exploration, humans risk destabilizing and destroying possible ecosystems in space. There's consensus among ecologists that human modification of the environment is almost always harmful regardless of intent. Ecosystems are inherently fragile and thus vulnerable to human degradation. We have a duty to protect this life as it is inherently valuable. To put human life above other life forms simply because we have greater cognitive awareness is presumptuous. Number 3. By not having these international laws, we run the risk of space militarization. We are entering an age of advanced warfare in which increasingly complex technology is being employed. In 1984, Ronald Reagan proposed a Strategic Defense Initiative, which was to become a missile defense system, including the use of orbital strike weapons. 32 years later, the technology exists to deploy these weapons, including hypersonic weapon transportation and boost-glide missile systems that can strike anywhere on Earth in less than 90 minutes. As it stands, there are virtually no laws discouraging or preventing nations from creating space weapons. The Outer Space Treaty is the only international treaty that addresses this issue, and it only prohibits countries from placing nuclear weapons in space. It does not prohibit the placement of conventional weapons into orbit or these new weapons systems. An overwhelming ethical obligation to protect space ecosystems would prevent this because value we would place on these ecosystems would, by definition, exceed whatever is gained by going to war. Number 4. There will be less war overall. It is common knowledge at this point that the resources on this planet are finite, hence why an increasing number of people are looking to space for colonization and mining purposes. This desire would incentivize nations to go to war with one another over these resources, with a barrier in the way preventing the unhindered propagation of space, specifically the belief that we must protect space ecosystems. We can prevent this inevitable warfare. This simply is impossible by negating the resolution, as greed would overtake solidarity. Number 5. There is minimal international cooperation, not only in terms of space, but on many other issues. Under the resolution, countries would have to work together for the betterment of our species as well as those found in space. This would allow all countries to have a voice on the international stage, and these discussions would move beyond space, which could unify countries that are currently at odds with one another. The only possible drawback one could point out is that research into extraterrestrial life would simply be driven underground if it was outlawed internationally. However, this form of cheating would be difficult to sustain, as intergalactic travel and research leave a huge footprint, so it is not something that insidious nations would be able to simply get away with. Their actions would be discovered and condoned internationally. Number 6. Economics. There is no denying that there is money to be made from space. However, mineral farming must be regulated internationally and in a way that best preserves potential life forms. Doing so not only saves microbial life, but is also beneficial to the economy. By agreeing with the resolution, countries will be forced to develop technology that will allow for space mining while simultaneously protecting space life. This would actually be better for the economy than negating the resolution, because rather than killing microbial space life in order to harvest minerals, we could preserve this life and perform research on it in a way that isn't damaging. For all we know, these microbes could be immensely beneficial to the economy by advancing scientific progress. However, we would never get to find out if we killed this space life, which would be the inevitable result of negating the resolution. Number 7. By negating the resolution, we risk destroying the purity of spatial environments. Mark Williamson informs people that through haphazard space travel, we risk the contamination of planetary bodies by our visiting spacecraft. Alan Marshall agrees, asserting that bacterial spores from spacecraft would contaminate planetary bodies in which we visit, potentially destroying life. Furthermore, optical and radio disruptions by orbiting spacecraft would hinder astronomical observations from Earth. Finally, unsystematic space travel would result in the buildup of spatial debris, which could render orbits inaccessible for millennia. Multilateral agreements between nations would address these issues rather than individual countries launching spacecraft whenever they want. It all starts with realizing that we have an obligation to preserve space environments. It is clear at this point that microbial spacelife is important to protect. Only by accepting this and forming international treaties in which every country works together as a collective body, similar to that of the United Nations, will spacelife be preserved as well as the aforementioned harms be avoided.